Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in. My name is Aishat Salami. I'm a technology policy researcher and I advocate for digital rights, inclusive frameworks, and responsible AI governance with a focus on the impact on women and regions in Africa and the global south. This video is a brief presentation on submission number 174 titled Artificial Intelligence, Digital Colonialism, and the Implications for Africa's Future Development. It's a submission for the 2024 Data for Policy Conference at the Imperial College, London. Before going into the paper itself, I would like to give some brief background on the topic, right? So in the mid to late 19th century, much of Africa was under colonial rule, with the colonizers exercising power over the labor and territory of Africa. However, as much as Africa has predominantly gained independence from traditional colonial rule, we find that in the digital age, digital colonialism still manifests in Africa through the control and ownership of critical digital infrastructure by foreign entities such as Western technological companies, and the resulting unequal data flow and asymmetrical power dynamics that flows from it. Drawing on references from Africa, the paper then sheds light on the various manifestations of digital colonialism in the continent's digital landscape. First, the paper finds that through the dominance of foreign digital platforms and services in African markets, foreign technology corporations gain unhindered control and ownership of the African digital ecosystem, which then allows for the exploitation of the continent's political, economic, social, and even the cultural domains. Also, the unequal flow of data allows for the monopoly of foreign multinational technological companies on the continent. And as much of Africa is without adequate regulations to protect its data, Africa then loses control of vast amounts of its data to foreign technological companies, who then have free rein to collect data from African users who depend on their platforms and services. This metadata that is extracted from African users is then exported and monetized by Western tech companies without any significant benefit accruing to Africa. While the influence of the big techs and the implications of data exploitation on Africa's future development encompass economic imbalances, the stifling of local innovation, and challenges to national sovereignty, there are also internal factors on the continent, such as the lack of adequate infrastructure, the absence of robust regulatory frameworks, non-efficient regulatory bodies, and even inadequate public knowledge. All of these empower external actors to exploit untapped data on the continent. Out of the 54 countries on the African continent, one finds out that less than 40 of them currently have data protection laws, and out of this, not up to 30 of them have data protection authorities. Furthermore, the economic disparity, the lack of necessary digital skills, and inadequate public knowledge also limit the control of the African nation, while empowering external actors to use their own power and resources to exploit untapped data on the continent. Also, the lack of comprehensive and up-to-date regulatory frameworks for the digital sector in many African countries. We find that the absence of robust national frameworks essentially allows external entities to exploit regulatory gaps that exist and assert their own control. And the reliance on this data has further expanded in the digital age. The lack of adequate digital infrastructure on the continent, which different studies have revealed, while compared with some other regions, has also encouraged many African nations to rely heavily on foreign technology and expertise for their digital infrastructure. Consequently, this digital dependence makes Africa vulnerable to external influence and limits the ability of Africa to actually set a digital agenda. These external actors can thus wield significant control over the data, the platforms, the technologies in Africa, therefore leaving African nations vulnerable to manipulation, exploitation, and digital colonialism. When these manifestations of digital colonialism on the African continent are linked to the use of artificial intelligence, we see the many incidences of algorithmic dispossession, which leaves Africa underrepresented and sidelined in important discussions that are related to growing the digital economy, therefore entrenching the centralization of power in the West. There is also beta testing or ethics dumping on the continent, algorithmic exploitation, and algorithmic oppression, which includes the integration of biases into AI codes. The effect of all this is to further entrench the historical injustice of colonialism in AI tools, amplify social biases, and encourage instances of societal harm to marginalized people. Though some African countries have recognized the importance of asserting ownership and agency in the digital sphere by undertaking some initiatives and responses to shape their digital future, it is essential that African nations develop, implement, and regularly evaluate policies that prioritize digital sovereignty. Given that the control of Africa's digital space and its sensitive data by foreign actors challenges national sovereignty, which explains the implementation of laws to restrict data transfer in some African countries. This paper therefore considers the arguments for localization of data while concluding that mandatory localization of data does not necessarily imply benefits. While mandatory localization of data presents its own challenges, data transfer restriction can still be used to enhance data sovereignty protection. And the rationale for this in the paper is that data localization measures could be used to balance sovereignty with practical considerations. For instance, the storage of sensitive data within the country or continent while permitting the cross-border data flows for non-sensitive data. So, in countries like South Africa and Kenya, one finds that data transfer is restricted in some cases and allowed only under special or specific circumstances. For instance, in Kenya, data which is collected is not to be transferred outside Kenya without proof that the jurisdiction to which the data is to be transferred has adequate data protection safeguards or that the data subject's consent has been obtained. Also, weak data protection laws and enforcement mechanisms pose a challenge in safeguarding digital sovereignty, which exposes sensitive personal data of African users to misuse and unauthorized access by external actors. The paper therefore recommends, among others, that data protection and privacy laws should be strengthened and enforced to safeguard user data and reduce the exploitation of African data. With respect to local ownership of digital infrastructure and innovation, the paper acknowledges the complex socio-economic landscape, the macroeconomic factors within the continent, and the fact that local ownership alone does not guarantee ethical data practices. This notwithstanding, local ownership still remains a catalyst for cultivating an environment for local innovation, safeguarding sovereignty, and also as a foundation to demand for accountable data governance and responsible use of data within the continent. And it is believed that prioritizing the development of homegrown technological solutions and startups can also help to reduce dependency on foreign actors, and it's considered a good place or a good starting place to foster local innovation. In order to consolidate digital sovereignty efforts in Africa, we find that some African countries have recognized the importance of asserting ownership and agency in the digital sphere, and they're therefore undertaking some initiatives and responses to shape their own digital future. For instance, Nigeria took a step with the launch of its digital economy policy and strategy, which is meant to harness the power of digital technologies in the country and diversify the nation's economy. Also, we have Rwanda with its dedication to fostering an innovation ecosystem through various initiatives that are seeking to ensure a skilled tech workforce and grow the digital sector of the country. On a continental scale, we find the African Union has launched a digital transformation strategy aimed at signaling a collective commitment to accelerating Africa's digital evolution. All these are examples to demonstrate that African nations and organizations are also seeking to actively assert their own agency. In summary, while the path may be challenging, reducing digital colonialism and fostering a decolonized digital future in Africa requires a multi-pronged approach with a combination of regulatory, educational, even economic strategies. And to safeguard Africa's digital sovereignty and economic interests, this paper proposes and recommends that policymakers should prioritize setting ethical standards and implementing regulations that ensure transparency and inclusiveness in technology development and deployment. Also, the laws should require robust data protection measures, encryption standards, and transparency in data handling practices. This without forgetting that digital sovereignty policies should also be regularly evaluated based on feedback from stakeholders and evolving technological trends. Furthermore, Africans must also secure Africa's interests in the digital era through active participation in global discussions on digital ethics and governance. It is believed that by prioritizing all this with digital sovereignty, investments in digital infrastructure, and balancing local innovation, skills development, and other practical considerations, African nations can begin to assert greater control over their digital destiny and unlock the full potential of the digital age. Thank you so much for your time.